Welcome back. All right, so fantasy hockey, of course, coming up in a bit here. And I wanted to look through each team's roster and say, all right, where would there be somebody who's maybe a bit of an underdog? Now, I did a video recently on 32 breakthrough candidates, bounce back candidates I've talked about. There's some uh, players you're going to hear in this list that may have been mentioned on a previous list, but this is more geared towards the fantasy side of it. So points and whatnot, right? Because if they're not getting you points, well, they look nice on your roster, but they're not really helping you. So we've got, of course, by division, the Pacific is first, and then the Central, and then the Atlantic, and then the Metro. There you go. That's how I organized them today, and different logos. Yeah, so there you go. Just to change things up a little. So with the Anaheim Ducks, I picked Isaac Lindstrom. Lindstrom, I could see him falling between the cracks when it comes to fantasy because there's other picks in Anaheim now that have definitely got more appeal. But I think with Lindstrom, he's young. A lot of the players on this list are players that in the event of an injury could end up playing a prominent role. Lindstrom is one of those guys. He does have good goal-scoring instincts. I think there's something more there than what we've seen so far. And if Anaheim's scoring comes up, it's possible that Lindstrom's going to be part of the reason that it does come up. There were some good additions by the Ducks in the offseason. We'll see if that positively affects his numbers as well. For Calgary, I wouldn't say that Blake Coleman had a bad year by any stretch. He didn't. But is there more there? Yeah, he can score 20 goals. He can score above that. And I would say, too, that with Calgary, there is an opportunity now for a guy like Coleman to maybe get more points. This may actually be a team that scores more than they did last year. They may have two really good scoring lines, and it's possible Coleman ends up on one of those scoring lines and gets more points as a result. So I don't expect Coleman to end up with 60, 65 points, but he may end up with more than what's expected of him right now. With the Oilers, I went with... This is an interesting one because I think for Puljujarvi, great. And of all the names for me to say, yeah, I'm going to write the whole name on there, it has to be Puljujarvi, right? Not Blake Coleman or Isaac Lindstrom. It has to be Jesse Puljujarvi. It's fine. Puljujarvi, it feels like if he's going to reach that next level, he's probably going to need to be traded. However, there's still that opportunity. There's still that potential. It is still there. You see it from game to game. The frustrating part is that conversion rate isn't where you want it to be with Puljujarvi yet, but I think it's still there. So when trying to pick an Oiler that I think could be one of those guys you grab in fantasy late that could end up getting you some points, I think Puljujarvi could be that guy. With the Kings, I went with Arthur Calia. Arthur Calia, a player I like, some good instincts, and again, there's going to be other players from the Kings that are going to go earlier than him. And as I mentioned with Lindstrom, I'll mention here with Kaliev as well, could be a guy who in the event of an injury in the top six, jumps into a top prominent role and may not give it back. Kaliev has good instincts, good offensive player, and so we'll see for him with the Kings how things turn out for him this year. Does he score more than expected? I definitely think that is possible. All right, San Jose. San Jose, I went with a goaltender. There weren't a lot of forwards and defensemen that I thought would maybe outperform, but Kähkönen I could see outperforming what people expect from him. He could end up being the starter there. It's going to be between he and Reimer, and so I do like Kähkönen's chances. I liked him in Minnesota as well. Shouldn't really be a surprise to anybody that he would be my pick from San Jose, but here we are. And then we get to Seattle. So remember all the hype early in the season for Brandon Tanev? I do. And I could absolutely see Brandon Tanev being a solid player again for Seattle. Now, the challenge for Tanev this year is going to be he should be getting pushed further down in terms of the depth chart from where he was last season for the first-year Seattle team. But I still think with his work ethic, and I think he's a better finisher than what people may realize, it is possible that Tanev gets some points, gets some goals. And again, this is about trying to... Because honestly, I think a lot of the top guys may cancel each other out in your fantasy leagues, although Connor McDavid's pretty darn good. So is Draisaitl. But it is those steals late in a fantasy draft that can end up making the difference. For Vancouver, I had a tough pick with a pick for Vancouver. And so I thought, you know what? I talked about him in the redraft I did today. I'm going to talk about him again here. Oliver Eckman Larson, people don't like his contract. The player himself is okay. Is he overpaid? Yes. Is his contract terrible? Absolutely. But Ekman Larson showed a little something last year with the Canucks when Quinn Hughes was out. Plus, he's been paired with Quinn Hughes at training camp before. They're just getting into things and how's it going to look. And so, in the event that Quinn Hughes switches to the right side and Ekman Larson's on his left, Ekman Larson's going to get some points playing with Hughes if that happens. So he may end up being a very good pickup. For Vegas, Nicholas Roy. Nicholas Roy had quite the season last year for Vegas. Gets overlooked. He is projected to either be the center or on the wing. I don't think it matters whether he's center or on the wing. I think he's a very good player. And I do think that Roy could hit 20 goals this year, and he could be an underrated pickup for fantasy. So if you guys are thinking about it, there you go. Now with Arizona, I went with a rookie. That, and really, he may not make the team, but he might make the team and he might be excellent, and that's Dylan Gunther. Dylan Gunther, very important training camp for him. Arizona, of course, getting him as the draft pick that they acquired in the Ekman Larson deal with Vancouver. And so having both of them on the board makes things interesting. But Gunther, if he can show that scoring acumen at the NHL level, he'll get a ton of ice time with Arizona that desperately needs that scoring. Even though, yes, their plan is still in place to tank again this year. I think if there's some goals to be had, I don't think they're going to keep that out of the lineup. I don't think we'll see, well, Gunther had too good of a preseason, so we're not going to put him on the team yet. I don't think that's going to happen. Chicago, I'm thinking outside the box a little bit with Domi. Now, Max Domi's on it feels like his 10th team in 3 years, right? Domi didn't really wow at all last season, hasn't wowed for the last 3. And it feels like with Chicago, this might be his last chance. But in Chicago, he may get a ton of ice time. He could end up on the top line. He could end up playing with Patrick Kane. So in the event that he plays with Patrick Kane, and again, you never know who Kane might get some chemistry with, and Kane's one of those players who can elevate players on his line, Domi might end up having a decent season. I'm not saying great. I'm not saying anybody on this board is going to be 80 points and higher, and they're going to be great. I'm just saying could very well be underrated right now. For Colorado, Alex Newhook. So the loss of Nazem Kadri, well, you're not going to replace Kadri. There's nobody who can do exactly what Kadri does. But Newhook has a lot of talent and a lot of potential. And I really think he could end up being that second line center for them. I really think that natural talent level is there. And so I think Newhook ends up being the number 2 center. I don't see any reason that would. Now, it could end up being Comfort. Comfort showed last year in the playoffs he can be the number 2 center as well. Maybe Newhook ends up being the number 3. But I still think Newhook has a ton of potential and could be one of those steals for you in fantasy. Dallas, I went with another rookie, which means he may not make the team, but there's some buzz around him. But if Wyatt Johnston comes in and shows, again, much like Gunther in Arizona, if he shows he can put the puck in the net or he's got really good passing, good skill level, Dallas will play him. Dallas definitely needs more players that do that. Maybe he steals some ice time from Sagan or Ben, right? So Johnston, rookie coming in, I think he'll get every opportunity to succeed. We'll see whether or not Peter DeBoer's coaching style works for Johnston, but that would be my pick for Dallas. Because finding somebody who's under the radar that I think could really, be a steal. Dallas, it wasn't that easy to find a player. A lot of them are very well known, highly rated, or maybe a little overpaid. Minnesota, I went with a goaltender for Minnesota. So, Philip Gustafson's coming off of a bit of a down year, right? Marc-Andre Fleury, not getting younger, probably is going to need extra nights off. Gustafson, this is a really good opportunity for this kid to go in there and show that he's going to be a regular NHL goaltender, that he can win a job and he can keep it. So I kind of like Gustafson as a dark horse pick for the Minnesota Wild. I honestly think he could have a good year. Which gets along to Nashville. Nashville, I'm going to go with one of their hardworking foot soldiers in Yakov Trenin. Trenin, really like his work ethic quite a bit, and work ethic is huge for me. Of course, the bottom 6 guys are very often guys that I like quite a bit, and so we'll see if Trenin ends up, and again, it's a situation where Nashville, somebody gets hurt, maybe Trenin jumps in there. Trenin's projected by, I think the Hockey News has him at 22 points. I think that's low, but again, I really like his work ethic, so maybe it's a blind spot. Maybe there's another Nashville forward that's being underrated, but I went with Trenin. I thought about Sissons, and I thought, nah, I'll go with Trenin. St. Louis. So here's the thing with St. Louis. They have so many good scoring forwards. Be easy for Barbashev to drop further in a fantasy draft than he should. Barbashev had a fantastic year last year. I think it's real. I think he can follow it up. I think he can have another year like that. I think he could actually get better. I think the point totals could go up. So that could happen. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not psychic, but I like Barbashev's game. And so we'll see whether or not he ends up with the season even better than last year. For Winnipeg, Dubois hasn't been a huge point producer in his career to this point. However, he's got the 1-year contract. I don't think he wants to stay long-term with Winnipeg. And so he may want to showcase himself with the idea of, hey, if I have a really good year, I might be able to go somewhere else next summer. So for Dubois, he may very well be motivated by the idea that he's showcasing himself for other GMs thinking about a way out of Winnipeg. Or maybe he'll want to prove he wants to stay in Winnipeg and have a good year. Either way, I think this could be a good year for Dubois. A player who has all the talent, can put it all together, and if he can do that over 82 games, he could be an 80-point player. For Boston, so they're missing a bunch of guys early. Jake DeBrusk, if he can tick all the boxes early in the season and get top line time, which he could, because again, Marchand's going to be missing the start of the year, DeBrusk could end up being dangerous. DeBrusk has hit 30 goals before. I that's why I can't use him as a breakthrough candidate, because he's done it before. And I couldn't have him as a bounce back candidate because he scored just fine last year. But it does feel like DeBrusk may be one of those guys who could go under the radar. Pasternak's going to go. Bergeron's going to go. People will still take Marchand. I think DeBrusk could score more than expected. For Buffalo, I picked Victor Olafson. Why? Olafson's a consistent scorer who I think can score more than he did last year. And I don't think he's going to be one of the sexy picks for them either. I think Cousins is going to get a lot of people picking him. Tage Thompson, obviously, after the year he had. Peyton Krebs may get a lot of attention, along with Alex Tuck, as the guys who came in from Vegas. And I could see Olafson dropping down a little bit further than he should. Olafson has shown year after year he's a solid scorer. And if their power play gets better, that means Olafson's likely going to get more power play goals. Pretty good on the power play when he came into the league. And if he can refine that scoring touch, they're in good shape. Detroit, you know what? I'm going with Husso. The reason for Husso is simple. Husso had a really good regular season with St. Louis. He then fell off in the postseason. Because that's the most recent games we've seen of Husso, I can see him being underrated. I really think he's going to be the starter in Detroit. I think he's going to get 50-plus starts. I don't think it's going to be an even split between him and Nedeljkovic. We shall see, though. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens in Detroit with their goaltending, because Nedeljkovic could end up stealing things, too. So it may be a really good competition in net. Florida. With Florida, at some point in time, Anton Lundell is going to be a better scoring forward. This may end up being the year. Florida, a lot of changes on the ice, at least some changes on the ice, right? And they're going to be without Duclair to start the season. Huberdeau's gone. There may be more offensive minutes for Lundell than we saw in his first year. And he does have that upside. The comparisons to Barkov make sense. I don't think he'll be as offensively gifted as Barkov at his peak, but he's still going to be pretty good. So Lundell to me is a dark horse from an offensive perspective. For Montreal, I went with a pickup from last summer, Christian Dvorak. I think there'll be less pressure on Dvorak this year than there was the last year, and I think his numbers could come up as well. Dvorak, he didn't replace Danault. That might be part of the failing there, and maybe it's a failing on those who believe that he could replace Danault. Very few can. But Dvorak's a good center in his own right, and with Marty St. Louis behind the bench, he may end up getting some points too. Marty St. Louis definitely helped him with the offense once he got there. For Ottawa, so this is a name I've been writing on the board. It's the last name I've been writing on the board a lot this summer, but Anton Forsberg, I don't think he's giving up that starting job that easy. I think Talbot expects to be the starter. Talbot's not coming in to be the backup. It's part of the reason he left Minnesota. Not sticking around. I mean, they gave the money to Marc-Andre Fleury. I think Forsberg's a pretty good goaltender. I don't think he's going to give up those starts easily. I think it's at least 50-50 if Forsberg can play as well this year as he did last year. Talbot is definitely an upgrade over what they had going on with their backup position, which was in chaos at points last year. But I think it'll probably end up being 50-50 between Forsberg and Talbot. And I say that as a fan of Cam Talbot, who also is a fan of Anton Forsberg. I do think it'll probably end up being about 50-50. For Tampa, I'm going with Brandon Hagel. Brandon Hagel, in his arrival in Tampa Bay, his offensive numbers were way down from where they were in Chicago. But Tampa Bay has, once again, it's an offseason. Players have left. There's a salary cap issue that Tampa Bay is going to have every year. And so Hagel's probably going to get much better opportunities. He should be in a better position to get points and goals this year for Tampa Bay than he was last year after the trade. So I could see people looking at his totals in Tampa and saying, well, Hagel, I'm not taking him. He may end up surprising some people with what he's able to do. Toronto, it was a bit tough with Toronto. I couldn't find a forward that I thought is a sleeper. Because again, with Toronto, there's so much media. There's so much exposure to all their players. So I went with a goaltender. And for me, with Samsonov, I think he's a young goaltender. I think that Toronto's going to get their share of wins. And it is possible that Samsonov ends up being the starter too. Matt Murray, they're counting on a bounce back year from him. But you don't go out and get Ilya Samsonov if you don't think he's going to win you some games as well. So Samsonov, to me, he's the pick from Toronto. And again, you guys can let me know in the comment section below from a fantasy hockey perspective, which sleepers are you keeping an eye on? Carolina, I'm going with a player who had a down year last year. I don't think that's who he is. I think Marty Necas is going to have quite the bounce back. And I think he's a guy, too, that can be underrated because there are a lot of good forwards in Carolina. So it'd be easy for him to kind of be unnoticed. And I think if he does have that bounce back year, he could outperform some guys who might go ahead of him when you do your fantasy draft. For Columbus, Yegor Chinakhov. Chinakhov was jinxed the first half of the year. And I don't know how many reviews I did where I said, and Chinakhov with an opportunity, it didn't go in the net because he's not allowed to get a goal. It happened a lot. It really happened a lot. He was snake bit. So as long as that doesn't happen again this year, Chinakhov should get his opportunities. And in Columbus, an organization that definitely likes to roll four lines and guys can move up and down the lineup, Chinakhov could end up getting some ice time. He starts putting the goals in the net. He can end up getting more ice time than expected. Maybe the absence of Texier leaves an opening for Chinakhov a line further up than he might have expected to be on. And we might have expected him to be on. So, yeah, Chinakhov could be a really good pick. For New Jersey, if you're a Devils fan, you know how good Dawson Mercer could be. If you're not a Devils fan, you might look at Mercer's totals and say, well, it's a little early for him to break through. Mercer's a very smart player. Really good hockey sense. And just looked like a veteran out there. I didn't see a lot of rookie mistakes from Mercer. I think the offense is going to come. It could be as soon as this year. And New Jersey might end up being one of those teams. And I've seen the debate, too. Today I saw on Twitter the debate of should New Jersey or Ottawa be favored as a team that jumps into the playoffs. There is an argument to be made for New Jersey. And if they end up being a playoff team, Mercer's going to be a key guy to get them there. For the Islanders, what was the rookie? R2 Ratu. If the New York Islanders are going to jump back into the playoffs, a rookie coming into the lineup with Ratu's skill level, and if under Lane Lambert they play a little more of an up-tempo offensive style, look out for the Islanders. Look out for Barzal as well. I can't put Barzal up there as a sleeper because he's their top scorer, but he may score a lot more this coming year than he had last year. I think that hype could really build up. Because he's much more talented than his points totals would tell you. But I would say that with Ratu, he may end up being a guy who comes in and has quite the season. The year after his draft, he gets back to being the player that he was envisioned to be before he dropped in that draft class, before the bottom fell out. For the New York Rangers, I went with a returning player here, and we'll see how it works with Kravtsov. Kravtsov, not likely to be picked in very many of the hockey pools that I'm discussing, but he could end up being an absolute steal in the late round. Because he does have the talent, and that's the thing. With top draft picks and with top prospects, They can have all the talent in the world, but it doesn't always translate at the NHL level, and you need that little bit of extra, thing, and some players have it and they adjust and some don't. This is the year for Kravtsov to show, I have it, I'm good, I've got this all set up, and go out there and wow us. For the Flyers, Morgan Frost. Morgan Frost is along the same line as Calia, Lindstrom, a guy who, if there's injuries for the Flyers, we absolutely know there's going to be. Morgan Frost could jump up, and maybe this is where his offense shows up. He's still young enough for that offense to show up. In an era where it feels like we're quicker than ever to decide who is or isn't a bust, Frost, I think, still has that potential. And in the event that he gets more ice time for Philadelphia, he could surprise some people. For Pittsburgh, there really is so much scoring to go around. I'll put Raquel on the board. I don't know how much of a dark horse Raquel is, but if you look at his numbers over the last, 4 years, he's been wildly inconsistent. I'm hoping and believing that consistency should show up in Pittsburgh, and maybe there's a 30-goal season there, right? If he gets off to a good start, if he's got good chemistry with one of the top two centers, and they're both Hall of Famers in Pittsburgh, then Raquel could end up getting a bunch of goals. So, as a fan of his the whole way through his career, I would like to see Raquel reach that level. And then closing it out with Washington, and I'll put a C there because it's Connor Brown, and it's a common enough last name that I figure, well, I'll put the C there, even though there's nobody else named Brown on the board or in the lineup for the Washington Capitals. Connor Brown coming over from Ottawa, I think his point totals, his goal totals should go up. He's an excellent penalty killer. He can also play top 6 minutes. So on a team where Backstrom's not going to be in the lineup for a while, a guy like Connor Brown and his offensive instincts and his good two-way game could be huge for Washington. So those are my 32 picks. Every team's on the board. Let me know your picks. Guys that you think could be steals in late rounds of a fantasy draft. That next guy that you think could explode. Big point totals all of a sudden show up. As they have for various players over the years. I can do videos on that as well. But for now, this is what we have, this is what we're going with, and this is what I'm going to post. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.